When did your health issues start to pop up as being an issue in your life?
Yeah, so this was all the way back in 2012. I thought I was great. My health was pretty decent. That was the first indication that my health wasn't optimal in 2012 when I presented with what looked like bloody diarrhea. That's the only way I can really describe it. And it started out really quite minor, wasn't too pressing or anything. But it's still quite a shock, when you see that bright red on the paper. You think, oh, okay, I'm obviously not optimally healthy right now. And so I took myself down to my GP over here in England, and basically, well, the first thing that the first doctor said that I saw was, if you think it's bowel cancer, you can forget it. So, a bit of a strange kind of reaction, really. But part of that made me feel quite confident because I remember these bowel cancer adverts about awareness and certain symptoms and then advocating to go down if you have any of the symptoms. I could tick every single one, this whole list on the TV that would come up on the advert. But so yeah, it sort of put my mind a little bit at ease. But you think, well, what's wrong with me? So they referred me to the hospital, and that way we went about having a sigmoid endoscopy. So it's like a probing device where they take biopsies and they run that for tests, and that's when they came back and confirmed, yep, you have ulcerative colitis. So that was, like I say, back in 2012. It's an inflammatory bowel disease. It's also classed as an autoimmune disease, and I knew very little about all of this at the time. So upon revisiting my doctor to talk over this diagnosis, it was a lot of the same information from multiple different professionals. They all pushed fiber. They all mentioned whole grains. And actually, I was kind of on track. I used to naturally base my meals around whole grains, and I just thought, well, I'm kind of halfway there. I've just got to eat little and often. So quite regularly, they said, little and often, small portions, but more frequently throughout the day would be beneficial. So brown rice, whole grain pasta, brown bread accompanied with fruits and vegetables. I only ever really had chicken breast, cod. Very rarely would I have red meat, mostly in the form of a burger, and so of course you've got the bun and more fruits and, well, tomatoes and things like that. So basically, that's what they sent me home with, just this advice. I didn't really need to take any drugs or anything at the time. It wasn't too severe, it was very low end. But after a couple of years, things just got worse. So I would typically go in and out of what we call flare ups. So when you were in remission, I just felt like a normal version of myself, a normal person, no problems. I could go out and go to work and have no worries. But when I flared, it would be once again like bloody diarrhea, but there would be many bowel frequency movements like throughout the day. So sometimes I would go in the beginning, maybe four, five, six, sometimes seven times, but this actually got worse. And so when I would flare up, it would almost immediately be sort of 7 or 8 times, and this number crept up. And so I remember going to the toilet, 10, 12 times a day, thinking like, that's a lot of times to go to the toilet. And every time there was blood, the longer I was in this flare up, the more weight I would lose, the more confidence I would lose. And it wasn't until 2017 when I flared up for the last time. Basically, I'd known going to the toilet maybe up to 20 times on a really, really
Oh my
bad day.
goodness.
But this last flare was just immediately sort of double figures, and it crept up to 30 times a day I was going to the toilet. And at the time, I was living with my parents. They only had a toilet upstairs. And I remember these relentless trips to and from the toilet. And I would just try and make myself comfortable on the settee, just laying down. And by the time I got comfortable, pretty much I'm getting signals, you need to go to the toilet. And so I would, drag myself upstairs and go. And it was exhausting. I was just very dehydrated. My muscle was just wasting away very, very quickly. And pretty much I rang up my nan because I wasn't driving at the time. My parents were in LA. And so they didn't know quite what I was going through. And I rang up my nan and said, I don't think I have another day left in me. I'm going 30 times a day. I don't forecast it. It's really, really bad. And so she said, okay, we'll take you first thing in the morning up to the hospital. And that's what we did. I remember that trip up to the hospital. It was so intense, just trying to hold in the output. It was crazy. It was very, very difficult to gain control, and that was sort of stressing me out. I remember grabbing hold of the little handle above the door, sweating, thinking like, oh, it's really such a difficult drive. But eventually got there and just presented like an absolute mess. I was very sort of weak and emaciated, dehydrated. They immediately linked me up with both an intravenous drip to hydrate me, just keep on top of that with electrolytes, And then also they were lowering inflammation right there and then with some additional steroids so that they could perform another investigatory just to try and find out, where I am. Because the last time they'd seen me, it was quite low end and quite mild. So I don't think they quite believed me really. But when they started to perform the second sigmoid endoscopy, they were very sort of light in the beginning, and then all of a sudden it sort of turned really serious, and they were bringing in other, other surgeons and doctors, etc., to come and take a look and offer their opinion. All of a sudden, I was like, it was almost like I wasn't in the room. They were talking very seriously among themselves, and basically, yeah, it was a bad situation. I had colitis, this disease just all the way up the colon. There wasn't any part of my colon that wasn't affected, so that they were basically relaying to me that there's a very good chance I'm not leaving this hospital without at least a large part of my colon going, but they're going to do what they can to try and get me into remission. And they actually went about this by trialing me on a new what is it? It's like a immune suppressant drug, basically. So pretty dangerous stuff, especially when you're in the hospital and you're feeling like weak and kind of not yourself. But that's what they did. And they said it would be maybe a 50-50 that I would be able to get into remissions to buy more time and that sort of thing. But this drug didn't take at all. I mean, I was on it for a few days longer than they wanted me on it, which was quite dangerous in itself. But yeah, the doctor, the main doctor there that treats, IBD, etc., he came down to me along with about 4 nurses that came into the room, and he was kind of like, sorry, mate, but we're going to have to take you down first thing in the morning, take your whole colon out. And all the nurses were looking at me sort of like, it's going to be okay, And I was sort of thinking at the time, I actually want this done. I feel like I've been poisoned. Everything
Wow.
we've tried isn't working. I was almost welcoming the surgery, like, please, like, yes, this is the answer. Just so tricky, because what they were doing as well was taking me on and off of steroids. And when they did that in the hospital, I would go from going 30 times a day immediately to going maybe 5 times a day, 7 times a day. And then when I came off the steroids, it would jump immediately back up to sort of 25, then it would creep up to 30 again. It was crazy. So there was no sort of saving me or saving my colon. What was happening, and it's kind of a bit grim, but when I was going to the toilet, essentially what was happening is parts of my colon were now coming out, and I was on my way to perforation. And so that the emergency surgery was to
Wow.
prevent that from happening, before it completely bursts, kind of thing. And yeah, they were obviously going to be able to plan a bit better in this situation. So there was no going back, basically. Woke up the next day because it was a long surgery as well. I can't remember what time they performed it, but it was the next day when I woke up. I was just out of it, felt like I'd been through a war. And I just remember the pain coming on, because it's almost like you go for a nap and then they wake you up and it's like, oh, what just happened? Look down and I could see this strange contraption stuck to my abdominal wall. And they just, pushed me into the ICU, and that's where I kind of began my recovery. When I went back to my own room, I started to feel a little bit more like myself, slowly but surely standing up and taking steps. I remember trying to wash my back and things like that because of the big cut down my abs was quite hard work, and just bending down to pick things up. They wanted to see that I was strong enough and independent enough to both look after myself but also change and manage my bag. So if anybody doesn't know, when you have part of your digestive tract taken out, they usually fit a bag to your abdominal wall, and I have what is called a stoma. So if you think stomach, stoma, the stoma is the last part of the intestine that protrudes through my abdominal wall. I had an ileostomy surgery, so I have all of my digestive tract all the way intact down to my ileum. So they took from that terminal part of the ileum to basically my rectum. That was gone. They left a little bit at the back, which was, in most people, I think 80% of people in my situation have, I think it's 10 centimeters or more left, like from the anus upwards. I only had 5 centimeters. I didn't know this until many years later. And so there was very little option for me in the way of reverse surgeries and other things, that people have gone about trying to sort of mitigate this situation that I'm in now with a permanent ostomy bag. Because sure enough, when I got home, and I think this is why people have reverse surgery so often, it really hits you mentally. Your outlook is very much affected by this. When I was in the hospital, I felt fine. I actually felt like I was not poisoned anymore. Like, thanks for getting rid of the poison, all the nurses coming around, they'd seen this so many times. They made me feel very just at home, very normal. But it wasn't until I got home. My parents went to work. My brother went to work. I was alone in my own head. Just my thoughts were very loud. I would look at myself and and try to find clothes to cover this up. I felt so alien. It also felt alien to me, and I wasn't really the kind of person that was well suited to this in many ways. I'd often seek comfort. I'm very much a comfort person, which is not a good thing. I have to say it's very difficult because you're always trying to pursue this thing that doesn't really exist. You know, it's like a hedonistic sort of a trait, I guess. But yeah, this bag that I have to wear affected my sleep, and so not only was my outlook already kind of pretty gloomy, but my sleep wasn't great because I felt restricted to my back. Um, and I hadn't figured out foods yet. So when I came home, I just went back immediately to eating all the stuff I still believed was healthy. I didn't even question the fact that, well, I ate these grains and the fruits and the vegetables and I snacked and almonds and all this stuff. You know, that maybe is the reason why I was in the hospital. I never really questioned it. I was so brainwashed that I thought I must get back to eating healthy food again. And this is when I started to see unusual things in the bag. So before, obviously, when I had my colon, I would just get the urge to go to the toilet. You go to the toilet, you flush, that's it. But all of a sudden now, I'm seeing the food in the state that it's in right before it hits the colon. So where my disease was. And what I was seeing was big portions of tomatoes, broccoli, pineapple, almonds, nuts. Sometimes there would be an entire, like, small blueberry or like whole seeds and nuts that I thought I was chewing up in the bread, you know, seeded bread and things like that. There would be meat in there, like chicken and cucumber and avocado and tomato and seeded bread. I'm chewing it all the same, but I never ever found meat in the bag. It was always liquid. But what I did find was all the fibrous plant materials. And so that to me was kind of strange. I was looking at it thinking like, that can't be right. I didn't really break it down. Like however I swallowed these plant foods, and fungi is just as bad. So plants obviously contain fiber, cellulose, and lignin structures, very, very kind of robust structures that we can't digest. But fungi contains chitin, and that stuff is just as gas promoting and it's just as indigestible. It's kind of like their structure, if you like, similar to the shells of insects, you know. So this stuff, like little mushrooms, would be present in my bag, and I was like, this is crazy. Like slices of it on a pizza, it would just be there in the bag, and so crazy to me. But I developed a love-hate relationship with food. It was very tricky because when you eat, it's like you have to eat, right? You get hungry and you who doesn't love food? And so I would look forward to meals, but then right afterwards, I would almost regret it immediately. I would feel a lot of discomfort. I experienced a few obstructions, so basically blockages where the food was struggling to kink round this tight corner and empty into the bag. And again, this only happened with plants. So brown rice caused me problems, mushrooms caused me problems, mango and pineapple caused me problems. And I think that's because I was just chowing down on things like pizza, and those parts are just going down in sizes that wasn't very advantageous given my position. You know, it was causing these blockages, and I've had a couple of bad experiences with that. One in which hospitalised me very, very temporarily, scared me. I woke up in the middle of the night and it looked like my stomach had kind of folded over my bag. It was so blocked that it was kind of, because it's protruding from my abdominal wall, it was kind of pulling on my abs and they were starting to roll over the bag. It woke me up. It wasn't too painful, but I was like, what on earth is happening? You know, went into the bathroom, turned the light on, and it was like, whoa, it was just crazy. I could almost not see my bag. And so I had to kind of like push like grab my abs and pull them up. And it was crazy.
Wow.
All because of plants, you know, this was all fibrous materials. So anyway, I go about my life. It was about 5 years that I lived this way before I really figured out that I shouldn't be eating any plants. And so I was lucky to stumble across an anecdote by Michaela Peterson on the Low Carb Down Under channel. And the title of the video was Don't Eat This. And for whatever reason, I just popped it on. And lucky that I did, because I'd reached out previously to my doctor about depression. They passed me on to a unit that we did have one call, and it made me feel pretty good because I thought we had the ball rolling on my depression, because that just happened almost immediately. I got home, I instantly felt depressed. They never got back to me with this second call where they were going to refine perhaps medications, therapy, etc. I was kind of on my own again, and it was 2 months after this call that I discovered this anecdote from Michaela Peterson. And so I just watched it, and it just blew me away on the spot. I felt like I was looking at a female version of myself. You know, it's like she had autoimmunity, she had really bad skin along with that, and she was severely depressed. And she was standing there on stage glowing with health, talking about how she's mitigated all these problems by going on this very strict carnivore diet called a lion diet. And so, first of all, I thought I had heard about this from her father, funnily enough, a few years ago. And I just thought, wow, poor guy can only eat beef. And he never thought that I would be one of those people, you know, that would be that severely kind of sensitive that maybe that's the best way for me to go as well. And so, yeah, the lion diet felt a bit too sort of extreme coming from my position where I was currently at. So as I'd finished that video, as you know, with the algorithm, I had these other videos pouring in, and that's when I discovered the BBBE challenge and Ken Berry, etc. I thought, well, that makes more sense. There's more variety. I've got my breakfast there. I've got lunch and meals I can make out of that. There's more variety. I'll try that. And so turned to my partner Lucy, who I'd met actually window cleaning along the way. And she kind of jumped in with me just to support me. So we both just the very next day, just, you know, no more grains, no more pasta and vegetables and fruits. We're just doing this beef, butter, bacon and egg challenge for 30 days. So that's what it was. That's all it was. I never thought to myself, I'm never eating ice cream again. I'm never eating pizza again. You know, what if I can't have chocolate and all this? I was so desperate. I just tried this 30-day challenge. And the very next day, my acid reflux went. It wasn't an issue compared to my depression, you know, but that was really kind of convenient. I was suffered daily with it. That just went instantly. Then I started to notice that my skin was just getting better, and I had some acne on my back. And after a week, it was practically gone. It was crazy. And I was like, wow, this okay. But still very much depressed, and I was struggling with energy just because I'd never eaten fats and I'd always eaten carbohydrates multiple times per day. And so it was kind of like I was waiting and I was waiting. And being the way I was like, oh, I bet this isn't going to happen for me. Anyway, day 21 comes, and all of a sudden, I just have all the energy in the world. My outlook is really positive. I remember enjoying everything about the day, like the birds tweeting and the trees just blowing in the wind, you know, and people's company, my customers. I just remembered pulling over and like just recording on my phone. I'm no longer depressed anymore. I feel really, really amazing. And just the way I saw the world, it's like putting a new lens over my eyes. The way I saw the world, what I'd even learned that far. So it was only like 3 weeks in, and I realized I wasn't burning in the sun anymore. I'd already looked into that and found a video on that, and it was just fascinating to me. I did crave, you know, for a few months. They got better as time went on, but after 4 months, I had no cravings. And what I would say is just slowly but surely, I kind of evolved a little bit the diet, you know, so I knocked dairy on the head. I don't even eat eggs anymore. I would say that I'm on like a modified lion diet with wild fish, and the extra fat I get from things like marrow rather than butter. I just seem to do better without the dairy. Dairy, I kind of get like congestion, and it can lead to more cravings. You know, when I have put butter in, I'm starting to think about chocolate or something, you know, and it's just not ideal. So that's what I did. I started a 30-day challenge, and I've been doing it now 3 years and 2 months. That's basically how good this way of life is. I love life now. I've got a really good outlook. I found that I can actually help other people where I wasn't even able to look after myself when I was depressed. But just by simply changing my diet, you know, I can take care of myself, and now I can actually help others. And I think that that's, for me, like I feel like my life is began, you know, it's really meaningful and I have purpose.